My name is Megan Sullivan. I'm 35 years old, and I work as a library assistant at a local elementary school, the kind of job that doesn't impress anyone at family dinners but fills every single day with something that matters. I am a single mother. My daughter Olivia is 9 years old. She has her father's eyes and my stubbornness, and she carries a book with her almost everywhere she goes. Tucked under her arm, stuffed in her backpack, sitting open on the kitchen table next to her cereal bowl in the morning. Reading is not something I taught her to do as a chore. It became the thing she reached for naturally, the way some kids reach for a ball or a paintbrush. Our life is modest. I budget carefully. I drive a car that has seen better years. Our apartment is small, but it's ours, and the shelves along the living room wall are full. I work long hours and I come home tired, but I come home every evening. That has always been the most important thing to me, that Olivia knows, without any doubt, that I come home. My sister Rachel lives a very different kind of life. She married into a wealthy family several years ago, and somewhere along the way she began to confuse financial comfort with wisdom. She has a large house, a son in private school, and a habit of offering opinions about other people's choices that nobody asked her for. At family gatherings, she is usually the one at the center, the one people compliment, the one relatives ask about, the one whose life gets held up quietly as the standard everyone else is measured against. I stopped measuring myself against Rachel a long time ago. I made my peace with our differences and decided the only life worth building was the one in front of me. But there is a line, and the line is my daughter. I never cared what Rachel thought about my car or my apartment or my salary. I did not care when she raised her eyebrows at my job or looked around my home with that particular expression she gets, the one that says she's being polite but barely. None of that touched me. Not really. What happened at that Sunday dinner was different. Because this time, Rachel didn't come for me. She came for Olivia. If you've ever sat at a table and watched someone make your child feel small, watch their face change, watch the light in their eyes dim just slightly, then you already know the specific kind of pain I'm describing. It doesn't feel like anger, not at first. It feels like something tearing, quietly, somewhere behind your ribs. If that has ever happened to you, this story is for you. Subscribe if you haven't already. Leave your experience in the comments. I read every single one. And if this story reaches you, click hype before we continue. Sunday dinners at my parents' house follow a familiar rhythm. My mother cooks too much food. My father tells the same 3 stories he's been telling for 20 years, and the relatives arrange themselves around the long table in the dining room that only gets used on occasions like this. It's warm and loud and comfortable in the way that only the home you grew up in can be. Olivia loves these dinners. She loves her grandparents' house. The smell of it, the old photographs on the walls, the garden out back where she used to chase fireflies as a smaller child. She always brings a book, because Olivia brings a book everywhere, and because there are moments at these gatherings, between the meal and the dessert, when the adults are deep in conversation, where she likes to curl up quietly in the corner chair and read. That evening she had brought a book she'd been working through all week. A story about a girl who discovers a hidden world inside an old library. Olivia had already told me about it in detail, the characters, the plot, the parts she loved, and the parts she thought could have been written differently. She had opinions about books the way some children have opinions about sports teams. Specific, passionate, entirely her own. She set the book on the table beside her plate when dinner began. Rachel noticed it almost immediately. I watched her eyes land on it from across the table. Watched the small shift in her expression, that particular combination of amusement and mild contempt that she sometimes wears the way other people wear accessories. She picked up her fork, cut into her food, and then said it loudly enough for the whole table to hear. "Is that another one of those kids' books?" Olivia looked up, nodded. Rachel smiled at the table, not at Olivia, at the table, as though sharing a small joke with the room. "She's 9. Shouldn't she be reading something more serious by now?" A few relatives chuckled. The awkward, reflexive kind of laugh people produce when they're not sure if something is funny but don't want to be the one who doesn't react. Olivia lowered her head. Her fork rested against the side of her plate, without moving. I changed the subject. Asked my mother about something in the kitchen, redirected the conversation toward my father, tried to steer the room somewhere else. Rachel let it go for approximately 90 seconds. Then she came back. Maybe if Megan spent less time surrounded by library books and more time focused on real opportunities, Olivia would already be further ahead. The table went quiet in a different way this time. Not the awkward laugh quiet. The uncomfortable, nobody knows where to look quiet. I felt it land. Not just in my chest, in my hands, the way anger sometimes moves into your hands first, before it reaches the rest of you. Olivia's eyes filled. She didn't cry. She held it. The way children hold things when they're trying very hard to be brave in a room full of adults. But her eyes were full, and her head was down, and she was staring at the table in front of her like she wanted to disappear inside it. I turned to Rachel and told her, calmly and clearly, to stop criticizing a 9-year-old child. Rachel shrugged, lifted one hand, set it back down. Relax. I'm just being honest. And then a quiet voice came from the other end of the table. May I ask what book you're reading? The voice belonged to Mr. Thompson, Principal David Thompson, who worked at my school and who my parents had invited to dinner that evening. He was a quiet man by nature, the kind of person whose presence you registered as calm before you registered it as anything else. He was looking directly at Olivia. The room shifted. Not dramatically, just slightly, the way a room shifts when the person with the most gravity in it decides to speak. Olivia looked up. Slowly. She reached for the book and held it toward him, showing him the cover. He looked at it for a moment, nodded, once, with genuine interest. Tell me about it, he said. Rachel was not finished. Even with the principal now engaged in conversation with Olivia, even with the table watching, she couldn't quite let it rest. She laughed again, a short, dismissive sound, and said, Don't encourage her too much. She'll start thinking reading picture books is some kind of achievement. Nobody laughed this time. The chuckles that had come earlier didn't return. The room had shifted and Rachel hadn't noticed yet. Olivia sat with her hands in her lap. Mr. Thompson asked her another question about the story, a specific one, about one of the characters. I watched Olivia's shoulders change as she answered. The tension that had been sitting in them for the past several minutes began, slowly, to release. She started talking. Carefully at first, then with more confidence, then with the particular animation she gets when she's discussing something she genuinely loves. Meanwhile, Rachel pivoted. She began talking about her own son, his private tutoring, his advanced placement program, the academic competitions he had been selected for. She delivered this information to the table in the same tone someone uses when they're making a point without technically making a point. The relatives listened. Several nodded. Some children are just naturally further ahead, she said, glancing toward Olivia as she said it. Olivia heard it. She was 9, not deaf. I put my hand under the table and rested it near her arm without touching it, just close enough that she could feel I was there. Rachel then turned to me directly and said it plainly. You can't really expect much, Megan. Not when a child grows up with limited opportunities. I looked at her for a long moment. I told her, still calmly, that Olivia was doing exactly fine. Rachel waved her hand, turned back to her food. Across the table, completely unnoticed by Rachel, Mr. Thompson was listening to Olivia describe the plot of her book, the characters' motivations, the arc of the story, the ending she thought didn't quite work, and how she would have written it differently. He was listening in the way adults rarely listen to children, with full attention, without waiting for a pause to redirect the conversation somewhere more adult. Because he had recognized, months earlier, what Rachel had never once bothered to see. Olivia had always understood stories differently than other children her age. Not just enjoyed them, understood them. She noticed things. The way a character's behavior shifted between chapters. The difference between what a character said and what they meant. The emotional logic underneath a scene. At home, she didn't just read, she responded. She rewrote endings she found unsatisfying. She created sequels to books that didn't have them. She kept a notebook beside her bed where she wrote down ideas the way other children wrote down dreams, quickly, before they disappeared. I had encouraged this quietly. I let her stay in the school library after hours sometimes, sitting at one of the small tables with her notebook open, writing while I finished organizing the shelves. I didn't make a big production of it. I didn't tell the family. I didn't post about it. I just let her do the things she loved in whatever space and time I could give her. Several months before that dinner, Olivia had finished a short story. A complete one, beginning, middle, end. It was about a shy girl who felt invisible in a loud world, who discovered that the things she noticed and the way she saw things were not weaknesses, but a kind of power. I helped her type the final version one evening after dinner. We sat together at my laptop at the kitchen table, Olivia reading her handwritten pages aloud, me typing. When we finished, she read the whole thing through once from the screen, made 2 small corrections, and said she thought it was ready. I submitted it on her behalf to a regional student writing contest for her age group. I didn't mention it to anyone outside the school. I didn't want the noise of other people's expectations or other people's doubts anywhere near it while it was still just hers. Mr. Thompson had read the submission. He was on the selection committee. He had recognized her name the moment she walked through my parents' front door that evening. He had been waiting, quietly, for the right moment. The tension at the table had been building steadily for most of the evening. Rachel had dominated the conversation, moved confidently between mockery and comparison, and the relatives had arranged themselves around her energy the way people tend to arrange themselves around whoever speaks the loudest, and most certainly. Mr. Thompson had listened to all of it without interrupting. He was patient in the way that people are patient when they know something the room doesn't yet know and understand that timing matters. Rachel said it one more time, something about children in advanced programs, about preparation, about the kinds of opportunities that separate children who succeed from children who simply get by, and she glanced at Olivia as she said it, lightly, the way you glance at evidence. Mr. Thompson set his napkin on the table. He turned toward Rachel, and in the same calm, unhurried voice he had used all evening, he asked her one question. Did you know that Olivia recently won a regional writing contest? The table stopped, not gradually, all at once. Forks paused. Conversations ended mid-sentence. Every face turned, first toward Mr. Thompson, then toward Olivia, then back toward Mr. Thompson. Rachel blinked. Her expression moved through several things quickly: confusion, disbelief, the beginning of a dismissive response, and then stalled. Megan. I sat very still, because the official announcement had not yet been made. I knew the submission had gone in. I did not yet know the result. Mr. Thompson explained to the table that hundreds of students had submitted stories from schools across several districts, that the selection process had been competitive and carefully judged, that Olivia's entry had been chosen as the top submission in her age group. He described what the judges had noted about her work, her understanding of character, her control of emotion within the story, the maturity of the narrative structure for a writer her age. Several relatives turned toward Olivia slowly, as though seeing her for the first time. Rachel made one more attempt. She said, lightly, that children's competitions weren't really a measure of anything significant. Mr. Thompson looked at her pleasantly. The winning stories, he said, will be published in a statewide student literary anthology. Then he turned back to Olivia and asked her to describe, briefly, the story she had written. Olivia was nervous. I could see it in the way she held her hands. But she began. She described the plot, the shy girl, the loud world, the quiet power of noticing things. She described the character's journey. She described the ending. When she finished, the table was quiet for a moment. Then someone began to applaud, softly at first. Then several others joined. I watched my daughter's face travel the full distance from humiliation to something I can only describe as arrival. Like she had finally, in that moment, been allowed to stand in the space that had always been hers. Rachel said nothing. She looked at her plate. Mr. Thompson looked at the table and said, quietly, some talents begin in silence. They just need one person to pay attention. The dinner continued. The food got cleared. Dessert was served. But the shape of the evening had changed completely, and everyone at that table knew it. The relatives who had chuckled at Rachel's earlier comments now directed their attention toward Olivia, asking about her story, asking what she was reading, asking what kinds of books she liked to write. Olivia answered each question with growing ease, her voice stronger with every exchange. Rachel stayed quiet for the remainder of the evening. She ate her dessert and responded to direct questions and excused herself before the coffee was finished. I did not confront her. I did not make a speech. I sat beside my daughter and let the evening be what it had become. Later that night, after we had driven home and Olivia had changed into her pajamas, she came and sat beside me on the edge of my bed. She was quiet for a moment. Then she told me that after Rachel's comment at the dinner table, she had considered, in that moment, whether she should just stop. Stop reading so much. Stop writing. Stop caring about stories the way she cared about them. Because if someone who was supposed to be family could look at the thing she loved and laugh at it, maybe the thing wasn't worth loving. I pulled her close. I held her for a long time without saying anything, because some things don't need to be answered immediately. Then I told her that the world would always have people who look at quiet, growing things and see nothing because they're looking for noise. That the value of what she was building was not determined by whether those people recognized it. That her curiosity, her specific, stubborn, beautiful curiosity, was never something to hide or shrink or apologize for. She went to her room, opened her book, read for 40 minutes before turning off her light. The next morning she asked if she could start a new story. I told her yes. There is a specific cruelty in mocking a child's joy in front of an audience. It's not just the insult. It's the performance of it. The way it recruits the room. The way it asks everyone present to validate the dismissal by laughing along, nodding along, staying silent along. Olivia felt all of that in the space of a few minutes at that dinner table. At 9 years old. Over a book she loved. If someone has ever made your child feel small, in front of others, in front of family, in front of anyone, you know that the pain of watching it is its own particular experience. You want to protect them. You want to respond. You want to say the exact right thing that corrects the damage and restores them immediately. Sometimes the right response is a calm, firm word. Sometimes it's simply staying present until the truth has enough room to speak for itself. If you've stood in that moment, if you've sat at a table like that one, share your story in the comments. Other parents need to know they're not alone in it. Subscribe if you haven't already. Click hype if this reached you. And to every parent raising a quiet, curious, reading child in a loud world, keep going. Keep the shelves full. Keep showing up. They are building something.